Welcome back to Antigua, Barbuda. Today it's time for our very first interview of the morning. We're speaking, first of all, to Ken Hackshaw. He has almost 25 years of experience working internationally in the area of risk management. We're here to talk to him this morning about risk, leadership, governance, and specifically about the 4th Caribbean Enterprise Risk Conference coming up in just about a month. Mr. Hackshaw, of course, is the founder and CEO of the Caribbean Risk Management Academy out of Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Hackshaw, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning, and thanks for having me.
Very, very welcome. Let's start with the general discussion before we get into talking about the upcoming conference, because it is about a month away. Let's talk a little about risk and leadership, because we've been termed as very risk-averse people in this part of the world, at least most of us. What's your general nugget of wisdom, general advice when it comes to taking risks in organizations, particularly as leaders?
Right. So I don't know if you remember, but I think about 2 years ago, you and I had a similar conversation for our last conference. So it's good to see you again.
Indeed.
So let me just share something with you. And this is not meant to be, gloom and doom, but for the rest of our lifetimes, the pace of change and volatility will never be the same as it was pre-COVID. There are massive disruptions that are going on now. Think COVID, the pandemic, think supply chain disruptions, think the war in Ukraine, think all cyber attacks that are happening, both in the Caribbean and outside. And so if our leadership, the folks that are currently in leadership, is not prepared to treat with these massive disruptions that are happening and that will continue to happen for the rest of our lifetime, then we are in for a rude awakening. And so organizations are led. So we need people to lead these organizations, to lead us in the institutions that we are working with. So it's incumbent upon, so we talk about risk governance and leadership. And so if our leaders aren't retooled to start thinking differently, to treat with the future uncertainties that are coming around the corner, the Caribbean institutions and the Caribbean islands will be in for a rude awakening. And so the goal of the conference is to not try to, but to provide leaders, employees with some of these new tools that one needs to have in their toolkit as we move forward in this most uncertain, volatile future we see ahead of us.
But how do we then convince leaders to be more risk aware, to take on these risks when you're talking about shoring up resources and recovery out of a pandemic? Some are going to say, okay, now it's time for us to buckle down and try to gather ourselves, so to speak. How do you encourage them to take these risks?
Well, so two things are most critical. So, we have a mantra at the Caribbean Risk Management Academy that goes like, if you can't think it, you can't act on it. And so leaders can now believe they know it all. They have to, for the most part, try and learn it all, right? Not personally with themselves, but with the folks around them. And so the thinking that was applied to the running and management of companies before cannot be the same thinking now. And so one of the major recommendations to leaders is to have a different type of thinking, not a different level of thinking. And unfortunately, you can only take them this far by way of suggestions and recommendations. They, unto themselves, you know what? The reality is, so Newton's law of motion tells us that, an object stays at rest until it gets kicked, until an external event happens. And unfortunately, a lot of our leaders are very reactive. And unfortunately, reaction means the bad thing has already happened. So some leaders may take the advice or the conversation we are having here to heart and say, you know what, we really need to start retooling and rethinking how we treat with risks. And until that happens, or conversely, until a really bad thing happens that forces the change, then things will stay status quo.
I'm glad you're advocating for a more proactive approach. Let's talk about leadership in terms of governance, in terms of political leadership. Not the aim of your conference, but we see a lot of things happening politically across the Caribbean, across the world. I mean, our own Prime Minister choosing not to attend the 9th Summit of the Americas. We see elections being called in, Grenada elections soon to be called in St. Kitts. How do you advocate for risk management when it comes to political leadership?
Right, and you could include in that list worry of bad things happening to leadership, the Turks and Caicos leader who was arrested in Florida. So what we're talking about, my good friend, is not for private institutions. It ought to start with the government leaders, because they are by far in the Caribbean the largest employer. They take the largest risks. So why are they not more prepared with that? And the greatest risk to any organization, political, NGO, health, finance, is people, the leaders, because they are the decision makers. And the end all, the be it all, the fatal accompli to good risk management equates to good decision making. Yeah, and to your question, and very good question it is what do we need to do to get government leaders from the prime minister down, and there are some good, some good exceptions of leaders who are taking the right approach. But again, it's either a bad thing, an external event, or an external body forces it upon them that say, if you want to get this loan, if you want to do this, you have to do this. Or these leaders, which is usually the last resort, saying, you know what, we really need to do this and get more risk intelligent so we can better run our institutions and our governments and our countries. But it is a tough sell. It is a tough sell. And hopefully, these types of conversations, folks attending the conference will sort of like lead them in the right path. Other than that is Murphy's Law coming on board and saying, a bad thing happens, it happens, and then they react to these bad things. Mm-hmm. But the future is full of uncertainty, complexity, be it weather events, cyber attacks, supply chain, major disruptions. Those things aren't going away. And you cannot treat with these new emerging volatile risks with the same toolkit you had 3, 4, 5 years ago. It's not going to work.
How do you move the conversation away from the simple understanding of risk, where leaders just think it's about just taking a chance? Let me just see what will happen. How do you get them to the point where they understand risk as a major issue that perhaps needs to be expounded on in a conference like this coming up?
Well, that is the penultimate test of the efficacy around risk management. Getting folks to understand the value of, say, enterprise risk management. And there are institutions doing it. There are countries now who are, developing, designing, and introducing legislation around risk management. Jamaica is a good example, moving along that path. If the leaders right now think that they are all knowing, we have a maxim that says the Aegis Smith syndrome is that because you've been in government or you've been a political person for 20, 30 years, I know it all, I've seen it all. And but all it takes is just one bad event, one major disruption. And if you're unprepared for that, then all else breaks loose. Having said all of that, risk management is not a panacea or silver bullet. So the analogy that we tend to use a lot is that it's like an airbag in a vehicle. It doesn't prevent accidents from happening, but it does reduce the impact when those accidents happen. So that's, if for no other reason, develop, deploy, train your staff in the things we are talking about, so that not if, but when these bad things happen, the impact to the country, to the people, to your institutions are less than if you had nothing there at all. And that should be taken away.
Yes, let's jump specifically into the conference coming up now on the 15th of June. It's themed From Vulnerable to Resilient to Anti-Fragile, the New Risk Frontier. Talk to us about how we can register and who you're looking to have attend this conference.
Well, You know, the last time you and I spoke, you promised to attend and get some more good information so you could go and share it with your team. So I'm looking forward to having you this time around. And so the conference is hybrid. It's being held at the Radisson Hotel in Trinidad and Tobago. But for those of us who are unable to attend in person, you could log on to CaribbeanRiskManagement.com, indicate whether you want to attend in person or virtually. There's a fee associated with those two options, and this is not meant to. It's not a talk shop. We don't do talk shops, and this is not necessarily to make someone aware. This is to make folks to activate something in their thinking that says, "Hey, we need to do this." So it's much more than a risk awareness. This is like risk activation, and so the speakers. We have Mr. Warren Black out of Australia. He's more into like the complexity around, what we're going through now and system thinking. We have Mr. Anthony Sabero, who's the CEO of Hitachi Systems out of Canada, speaking to technology risks, specifically cybersecurity. Ambassador Ralph Thomas from Jamaica. Ricardo Lewis from NGC, and many, many more. So all of the main risks associated with or aligned to the Caribbean nations, whether it's tourism, hospitality, energy, finance, technology, those topics are the major topics being addressed at the conference. So there's something in there for each Caribbean institution.
Excellent. Is there a deadline by which we need to apply before we go?
No, so the sooner the better, because COVID is still with us. So if you're being in person, we are spacing it out such that no one is sitting on top of each other. But we like to have registrations closed off on or before, say, June 10th, because the conference is on June 15th.
All right, Mr. Ken Hackshaw, let's just go over the prices. So if you're attending virtually, it's $205 US. If you're attending in person, $250 US, and it comes up on the 15th of June in Trinidad and Tobago. Is that right?
That is correct, sir.
All right, Mr. Hackshaw, thanks so much for joining us. That's all the time we have for this morning. We really appreciate talking to you this morning, though.
Thanks for having me.
Very
have
welcome,
a good one.
sir. All right, you too. So Ken Hackshaw there, he's the founder and CEO of the Caribbean Risk Management Academy. Antigua Barbuda today will be back after this break.